Well, hello. I am so glad we have this packed audience to come hear us. But you guys are getting the best because for all you moms out there and all those of you who want to have kids or are glad that your kids have already graduated and you don't have to deal with any of this, I think that for all of us, their well-being is so critical, and the things that our kids are dealing with now don't even compare to what we dealt with. I mean, it was just a walk in the park for us growing up, and now to see what our kids are dealing with is so tough. So I want to introduce myself. I'm Lisa Breckenridge, and I'm moderating this panel, and I'm going to have just as many questions as I know you will for our panel, because we have some of the most amazing women gathered here for you. So right next to me, we have Dr. Deepika Chopra. Did I get it right, Deepika? I got the right emphasis? Close. Deepika.
Closer than most.
Closer than most. Okay. I love this about Deepika. She's going to tell you that she's an optimism doctor, and I want to know what that is because I think we can all use a lot more optimism in our life. Next to her, we have Marissa Gold, who's the founder of Intuit Parenting. And then we have Dr. Karen Wilson in the green. She's a neuropsychologist. She founded Child Nexus. And then finally, we have Dr. Brett Gensel-Durman, who is the co-founder of Innovative Group Psychotherapy. So that's kind of who we are. I'm going to pass the microphone down so we can give you a little bit more. I'm going to let each woman introduce themselves a little bit more. And then we'll get into some of the questions and hear what you guys have to say about the well-being, the mental well-being of our kids.
Hi, I'm Dr. Deepika Chopra. I am an optimism doctor and a happiness researcher and a visual imagery expert. I'm also the founder of Things Are Looking Up, and that is my brand, which is a place for optimism, and our first product is actually here today. It's a deck of optimism cards, which is based on my practice for the past 11 or 12 years. My background is that I have a doctorate in clinical health psychology, but I've studied the science behind happiness and resiliency and optimism and hope for the past a little over a decade. And since having my 2.5-year-old son 2.5 years ago, I've had an extra special interest in helping people on how to raise a more optimistic child. So I'm really happy to be here on this panel.
Hi, I'm Marissa Gold. I'm the founder of Intuit Parenting. I work with parents who have children from newborn to 15 years old at every age and stage of development. The 4 tent poles that I work primarily from are mindfulness, emotion coaching, brain development, and positive discipline. I also run social and emotional support groups for tween and teen boys and girls from 4th to 9th grade. And I have 2 children. They're 11 and 14, so right in the middle of the tween and teen years, and it's real fun.
There you go. Oh, you got 2. Hi, I'm Dr. Karen Wilson. I'm a clinical neuropsychologist, which means that I study the relationship between brain and behavior. And in my practice, I basically provide services and do evaluations for kids who are struggling either with learning, processing, or social emotional challenges, and parents want to find out why they're struggling. And so what I do is I do the evaluations to determine how we can help them achieve their full potential by connecting them with professionals who can provide appropriate support. I'm also the founder of Child Nexus, which is a web-based platform which connects families and parents who have kids who are struggling with providers who can provide services to support them.
Hi, my name is Dr. Brett Gensel-Durman, and I'm a clinical psychologist as well. I've been in the field for about 20 years, and I'm also a mom of 2 boys. I have a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old, which means that I am a master schlepper, and I don't know if we have any other master schleppers out there. Yes, we do. So I've mastered that really, really well. But I have worked at the same nonprofit agency for the past 20 years doing individual, family, and group psychotherapy. And I'm also the founder of Innovative Group Psychotherapy. And you might be asking, what is Innovative Group Psychotherapy? It is a practice that integrates therapy with expressive arts, music and drama and art, as well as mentorship from industry professionals, because my belief is that we can help kids develop better coping strategies to deal with negative experiences in their life if we can match it with something that resonates with them and that they enjoy.
Okay, so that's a little bit about everyone up here. Obviously, you'll want them all in your Rolodex, or at least follow them on social media as well, because I know they put out important information and little nuggets that might help you get through your day as well. So we're going to start some of the questions that I have for these lovely women, and we're going to start with Karen and Brett first. I want you to both talk to us about the different stresses and the types of stress and anxiety that you're seeing with our kids today, and the biggest areas of concern and how we're supposed to help them cope. Karen, we'll start with you.
Okay. I would say for me, because of the nature of people coming into my practice, I see a lot of kids who are struggling with anxiety, and other providers and professionals who I work with say that anxiety is it's at an all-time high for kids and adolescents and kids, and it's affecting younger kids. So you're seeing kids who are 5 and 6 struggling with anxiety and sadness and stress. And so I see a lot of that. When I dig a little deeper, a lot of times I find that there's some underlying struggles with learning and processing. So kids are struggling in the classroom and they're noticing relative to their peers that they're having more difficulty. And that's evaluation of themselves relative to their peers creates some of that anxiety and stress in them, particularly when you have a child who's struggling and they're in a high-performing school, or even in a school that doesn't have very high demands, but there might be demands placed by the parents or the child themselves about struggles they might be experiencing.
Well, and I think it's hard, especially when you live here in Southern California, whether you're trying to get your kids into a private school or a public school. I know for the private schools, it's worse than getting into a college. And so the stress that we put on these kids to be able to interview well, and the tests and the grades, and whether or not they get into the school they want, I can't even imagine what that's like for them.
Right. And oftentimes there's a mismatch between the expectations the parents have for the schools they want their kids to attend and the school that's right for that child based on their social emotional constitution and their learning profile.
What's really
and so that's something to keep in mind.
Better for them as opposed to better for the parent. I'm going to get to what we need to do to help them cope, but Brett, I'd like you to address that as well, as far as the stress, the types of stress and anxiety that you're seeing.
I think in my practice, what I'm seeing a lot of is, as Karen said, is a lot of anxiety, social anxiety. So I'm seeing a lot of kids who come into sessions who are struggling to manage interpersonal relationships and who at some point are experiencing such problems in school that they want to be homeschooled, that they're avoiding schools. There's a lot of school refusal. And so if I can talk a little bit about the coping strategies, one of the things that I would say is, why are we seeing all of this? And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is, we do a really good job of telling our children, eat right and exercise in order to have a healthy body. Do we do a good enough job helping them to understand that mental health is something that we have to do every day? And so I would say we really need to help kids develop a variety of different coping strategies that they can use depending on if the stress is little or big. But we need to help them recognize that even grabbing a cup of tea or hot chocolate is a coping strategy. And sometimes it's okay to look at a meme if it makes you laugh and bring you joy. But I think we need to kind of help them integrate that into their everyday life so that when something big happens, they know what they can do.
I think it's like setting those limits even as they're young, and we're setting boundaries with them, and they keep growing and growing and growing, so that when they get older, they know how to deal with the big boundaries. It's starting at a very young age, helping them deal with the stress and not necessarily getting involved. I think parents have become so involved and over taking care of the problems for their kids. We're not letting kids figure them out themselves. Is that what you're seeing?
I would definitely say that it's something that's happening, and that's how kids develop the problem-solving ability. And the other thing is that we need kids to spend time in unstructured play, and there's a lot of overscheduling of kids and a lot of structured activities, and when they engage in too many structured activities, they don't develop the ability to problem solve and be creative and figure how to strategize and pivot when things aren't working well, and to interact with others socially. And I think that can be a detriment to their social emotional well-being.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that I think it's also really important, in addition to teaching about mental health and well-being, to really dig down and to understand what stress is, and to explain to children that there are some stressors that are okay and actually activate certain instincts like fight and flight that actually help us in certain ways, believe it or not. And I think in the society that we live in today, and there's so much talk about stress, I've actually listened to every panel today, it has come up on every single panel. Everyone is feeling loads of stress every day, all day long. And I think that we as adults also need to understand what stress is toxic versus normal, we need to get through the day stress. And then I think that needs to become a lesson that we teach our children from a very young age, and we need to teach them to differentiate between, is this the kind of stress that demands the reaction that it's getting from you versus how can we get through it with certain coping mechanisms that I can teach you as your parent?
I think one of the best ways to teach your child anything is modeling. And so I'm a big proponent, even as an optimism doctor, to not shy away from struggle. And in my world, my specialty is really blending together holistic practices and evidence-based science. And my world, the M word is a very big word, the manifestation word. And we live in LA, so you can't really go far down the road without hearing manifestation. And within that world, so I did my dissertation on evidence-based manifestation, but there's this whole idea of, I keep hearing it, like, if it's too hard, it means the universe is saying it's not right for you. And I don't want to teach my child that. I don't think that's true for me. A huge part of raising optimism and increasing happiness is the idea of exercising your resiliency muscle. And in order to build resiliency, you have to head on something that's less than ideal, or a struggle, and head it on with being able to cope with it and seeing it as temporary and that you have the ability to overcome it. So it's modeling sort of not pushing struggle underneath the rug. And with my 2.5-year-old, partly because he knows everything. I have this person that lives in my house that literally knows everything. I could be talking in one room and he's playing and he knows what I'm saying. He knows everything. So I can't hide anything from him. And we are a very open book family. Not that I think you need to weigh your 2.5-year-old down with something that's inappropriate, like some crazy argument or fight, but we were driving the other day, to my parents' house down in the South Bay, and my husband and I had an argument in the front of the car, and I literally crawled over, don't tell the highway patrol, I got out of my seat, crawled over, and sat next to him, and I explained to him what our argument was about. I mean, it was very silly, but I was like, Mom's kind of stressed, and I'm in not a great mood, and, I just explained it to him, and he got it. And I think, instead of just, brushing everything under the rug, and then the other thing is, which I see over and over again, we as humans are more prone to being pessimistic. It's from an evolutionary standpoint to imagine the worst case scenarios. And so I don't have to teach people around me to worry more. You're going to worry. But what I do feel is that I have to teach people to give more time and place and space for things that are going well, and for things that do make you happy and bring you joy. And I always tell my parent clients, and now I tell my adult clients too, even that don't have kids, go on a happiness hunt every single day with your child. Literally, we walk to Trader Joe's and we just point out things that bring us joy and make us happy. And it's kind of become this little thing that I prescribe to people, the Dr. Deepika Chopra's happiness hunt. And it sounds silly and it sounds really simple, and it is simple, but it's a practice that rewires your brain and goes the distance. It's a small step, but it's basically just showing your kids that they're going to be exposed to all these things that are happening around us in the world. And unfortunately, we do live in a time right now where there is a lot of really awful things happening. I mean, just this weekend was awful, and tragedy happens. And then there's other things like the news, and I'm not a big fan of saying to adults, turn off the news and ignorance is bliss. I don't actually believe in that. I think that you could be that person that's inspired to do something if you're in the know. But I do think you should seek out things that make you happy and model that for your children. We have to seek them out. What brings you joy, that's just as important as what stresses you out. And if not, sometimes more important to balance it out.
I love that. And as someone who was a newscaster her entire life and reported on the worst of mankind and then also the best of mankind, I have a website now called Happily Lisa where I get to focus on all the happy in life, because there is so much happy out there. And when you've had to witness an execution and you've had to cover the worst cases of abuse, to be able to focus on the happy. And the thing I tell my children, because I have twins, a boy and a girl who are nearly 15, is I give them the analogy, it's like the ocean, the tide comes in and it comes out. And so you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. And it's how we navigate with, I always tell them, strength and grace. Also, another thing I've been saying lately is, and it's something my mom used to say, and it's been around forever, this too shall pass. But it's important to remember to teach your kids that this too shall pass. So when you're in a tough time, this is going to pass, but also to embrace the good times because they're going to pass too, because nothing ever stays the same. And I think teaching them that they're not going to be stuck in whatever this moment is in time, and they're going to get through it is critical. Okay, so our next question. We'll start with you, Brett, for this one. You work as a psychologist. You've created group therapy for your teens. So explain the group therapy, and I know you brought in music and art. And for what ages does that work for?
So I'm going to kind of start with talking about why music and art, because I think that's something that we've been doing for centuries, right? In order to express our emotions, to move through negative experiences. It's a language all within itself. And it's also a way in which people can express things safely. And so in my experience working with children and adolescents over the last 20 years, what I recognize is not everybody can manage talk therapy, particularly kids. And that's for a variety of reasons, right? Some kids are really timid and shy and struggle with it. Other kids have an underlying language disorder which make it difficult to articulate their emotions. And other kids have experienced trauma. And I use the term trauma loosely because we've all experienced things that create really tremendously painful emotions. And so using music and art and drama is another way that kids can express themselves. And I encourage you to think about for your child, if at any point that you think therapy would be an important thing for them, to think about what resonates with your child? What do they love? Because if you can pair that with therapy, then we have a much better likelihood of getting them to be open to the process. And when you're doing something like music or art and drama, you can sometimes go to places, deeper emotional places, that maybe words can't necessarily go to. So the groups that I run the age gamut from latency age up until teens. And it's really an amazing process to watch a child come in and write a song about maybe in a time in their life when they've been bullied, for example. And then they get to write this song in the way they want to write it. They can rap it. They can do it however they want to do it. And they also get the scaffolding from the mentor, for example, that knows how to do this process. So they feel confident. And then they're able to have this infused kind of, hope in terms of how am I managing to get through this? And what do I want in the future? And what ends up happening is you get this process and this product that is really empowering for the child that they can feel proud of. So that stress that you were referring to gets channeled. Their negative, painful experiences get channeled into something that is really quite beautiful.
Okay. I love that. I want to move on to how we can help the parents cope. So Marissa and Deepika, I want you to address those, like how we can help all of you cope when we're going through tough times with our kids, how we ourselves can stay optimistic and really help them help themselves.
So, are you okay? Untangled? Okay. So, I think, as Deepika said before, I think a big piece of this is modeling. And I think a big piece of this is understanding what your stressors are and when mommy or daddy might need a timeout themselves. And I think it's okay to admit that. In fact, I know it's okay. And I think that a lot of times we as parents put so much stress on ourselves about having to keep going and not show our kids things and keep things from them, etc. And I think that actually does a huge disservice to ourselves and to them. And I liken this to the airplane model where, when the oxygen mask comes down, you have to put it on yourself first. And if you don't do that, if you aren't taking care of yourself first, you are going to run out of energy to take care of your children and your family and your friends around you. And so I think just like we have to teach our children skills to learn to cope with their stressors in life, we ourselves have to have our own skill set or tool set that we know works for us, whether that is going for a walk or reading or dare I say, have a glass of wine. I mean, I don't obviously want you to become an alcoholic, but there are reasons why people choose a glass of wine to decompress. But whatever it is, going to a yoga class. And then I think also having real skills in your toolkit to help you deal with the stressors that you have in your life, and saying to yourself that it's okay to have those stressors and how do we get through them. And the toolkit can be any number of things, from breathing exercises to yoga classes to mindfulness awareness and to grounding ourselves to time in activities with our children. So there's a whole host of things that we can teach you if you don't already feel that you have the skill set to work through that for yourselves before you can help your children.
Being a parent is really tough. I mean, just holding it together for yourself, and then, how can I stay optimistic in this world? And I don't mean to keep bringing up this past weekend, but it was a really rough weekend for many families, and then on top of the families that went through what they went through, like just for Los Angeles on the whole, for just being here. I'm an LA native, and the passing of Kobe Bryant and his daughter and the other children on that helicopter really shook me in a way that I'm even amazed by. Today's like the first day I'm actually left my house, and I'm an optimism doctor. So, I mean, I think that it really was a reminder to me in a lot of things that I teach that, like, you can't skip the bad parts. You can't skip the healing. You can't skip the struggle. Being an optimist or creating happiness is not about someone that is experiencing positive emotions 24/7, 365 days of the year. That is an Instagram feed, and that is not real. There's no such thing as that. A real human experiences the full range of emotions. It's how we navigate through them. And showing our children, I was worried. We were at a birthday party for a 3-year-old when we had found out, and there was no time to intentionally, create any sort of reaction or have something to share. My son just saw that Mama and Dada were really sad. We cried. And so I think partly I wasn't going to share with him any details of there's no reason he needs to know that a helicopter crashed. But Mommy and Daddy are sad, and he's okay to see that. And so I think it's what we do with it. So what are the things that I tried to do and in front of him, not just because they're my own, but my son pulls cards with my husband and I every single day from the optimism deck. And sometimes I need it more than others, and he knows it. So sometimes we do it every day as a normal thing, and we take the happiness hunt walk as a normal thing. But I might say, Mama needs something extra to make her happy today. And what am I going to do? Maybe it's a dance party. Maybe for us, it's music in the house. So even if it's getting up and dancing for 30 seconds while making pancakes in the kitchen, and he's very happy to do that too. So it's really this idea, I think, of being open. Our kids are humans, just like us. They're just smaller versions. And sometimes, I think I get the best reaction out of a situation if I treat him as a human and sort of not try to just do too much to mask things. And then a couple things that I think that you can do every single day to increase your own optimism and your kids is be outside for 2 hours on average. That's it, every week. Just be outside. Research shows that increases happiness. It decreases stress hormones. It does so much. You don't have to exercise. You can just sit there. Just sit outside. This counts. What you're doing right now counts for your 2 hours. And make sure that your kids are getting that too. And it's amazing we live here that we can do that full year round. Sleep. Sleep is a big one. Everyone always asks me, what's the magic pill that I can take to increase my happiness? And sadly, I'm there's no magic pill, no matter what they tell you. But sleep comes really close. And getting uninterrupted sleep, and it's not about the quantity per se as it is about the quality, is really important. And really figuring out with your children too, are they getting enough? There was an entire study that was just done on the effects of social media, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that with youth and anxiety and mental health and depression. And they actually surprisingly found that it really wasn't about. There's a whole bunch of stuff. It wasn't really about the quantity of time they spent on their devices. It was about how they were feeling during the time they were spending, but on top of it, the things that had more detrimental effect to them was lack of sleep and not having a healthy breakfast. So there's these things that we stress so big time about, which are valid, but there's these things we could do, like just it seems simple, but sleep's hard for all of us, especially when we have kids. But just not forgetting that, like, when they're past that year, we worry about that. We count, we have apps to be like, my infant woke up here, slept here, he got 12 hours here and 2 hours here. Like, we still need to manage our children's sleep when they're in school, when they're older, when they're teenagers. Like, getting good sleep goes a very long way for happiness.
Like I said, my kids are almost 15, and I am like just so rigid about sleep and getting to bed at a certain time, and then waking up and I make them breakfast every single day, and I'm lucky that I can do that right now because I'm not working the way I used to, and they'll even tell me. Our friends say you're so lucky because we're not getting breakfast, and these are all, families are going to Brentwood, and they have plenty of means to get breakfast. It's not that; it's just they're not waking up in time. Their parents aren't doing it for them, and I think that breakfast time, and even though I'm like, after them to get out the door and don't forget to brush your teeth and get your this and that. That time is so critical because it helps set their day. I think for the whole day. Okay. As parents, and this can be a free-for-all, what are some of the things we can do to be aware of what our kids are going through and to help them help themselves? I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but anything else before we get to another big one, which is going to be social media? We'll get to social media after this.
So this might maybe be a bridge into it, but what I think it's important to be very intentional about the guidelines that you set up in your home. And what I mean by that is, an example is my children know that even though they both have cell phones, they are not allowed to be on those cell phones in a car ride that is under 30 minutes. Ever. Now, the teenager, because she has a 30-minute commute to school, she does get 2 minutes at the end of the day, literally 2 minutes to check her Instagram and her Snapchat feed and make sure she's put a streak up, but literally 2 minutes. And then if it doesn't get put away, she loses the phone for 24 hours. So, and by the way, as parents, sometimes we are afraid to do that and to set intentional guidelines in our home because we're worried that our kids are not going to like us. That is okay. We are all up here giving you permission to do things like that. You are not supposed to be their best friend. You are supposed to be their mom, their caregiver. You are the person that's supposed to set those guidelines. And when you do that, believe it or not, what I have found, not just with my own children, but with all of the kids that I've worked with, when I help parents actually put real guidelines into their routines, 99.9% of the time, the kids are happier and the parents are happier. We actually crave routine and we crave accountability. And so if our kids are not going to do it because their brains are not at the place where they can actually do that yet. They're literally not cognitively built until they're in their 20s to be able to have the ability to control themselves. So if we're not going to do it, it's not going to happen.
I would also just say to have the tough talks. Like, suicide is the second leading cause of death in this country from ages 10 to 34. That's unacceptable. And we need to have the tough talks, and that's hard as parents. A lot of times I've talked to parents, and they're like, I don't want to bring it up because I'm afraid if I bring it up, it's going to put it in their head. Like, they already know. It's already in their head. They probably know someone that has committed suicide at this point. Not my 2.5-year-old yet, but you know what I mean? Like, at this point, if they're in junior high.
I guarantee it.
Yeah.
I guarantee it. If they're in junior high, they've heard the terminology.
Yes. And it's better for you to be able to craft that conversation intentionally and have them hear from you and be able to have the uncomfortable talk and have open lines of communication. And especially if they do know someone that has gone through that or they've seen that, even if it's on television, whatever it is that they're exposed to, you being able to follow that up with a conversation. So the point is just be uncomfortable, get comfortable having the uncomfortable talks, and you are the ones that have to do that for your kids so that there's an open line of communication.
One of the other things I would say is that there's so much emphasis on getting things done, and I heard one of the other speakers prior to the session talking about busyness and how we're all very busy. And We talked about the need for some time in and some downtime, and it's really about balance, balancing the time for homework and focus and drawing and for meditation and mindfulness. But kids also need connection time. They need time with a parent sitting side by side, face to face, eye to eye, not sitting beside you while you're scrolling through your Instagram feed, but checking in with them, having conversations with them, tuning into how they're feeling, how was their day, not just fine, what was the best thing that happened to you today? What made you sad today? What do you think you want to do differently tomorrow? That's how we engage them, and we help them to develop their social learning and their emotional well-being. And when we do that, they're better able to regulate their own emotions, recognize when they're having difficult emotions, and they're better able to process them because they know that there's a safe person and a safe place they can go to talk about that with.
One of the things that we didn't talk about in terms of this study about social media is when you think about the amount of time that our kids are spending on iPads and iPhones, it really limits their amount of time that they're having in meaningful face-to-face interactions with another person. And so what happens is that when you think about when I look at you and I have eye contact with you and I smile at you and we laugh together, what's happening in our brains? Dopamine is getting fired into our brains and we're feeling happy and we're feeling good and we're experiencing joy, right? And so if we're spending hours and hours in our rooms without any face-to-face interaction, then you think about what kind of a buffer just social interaction can have against anxiety and depression. So encouraging your children to really be spending time with their friends, that's a really good coping strategy. And that's honestly one of the reasons why I advocate for group therapy, is being able to be in an environment where kids can practice these really difficult interpersonal challenges as opposed to breaking up over the texting, right, or ghosting somebody. We need to teach our kids how to have positive interactions with people.
I know we're starting to have about 10 more minutes left, and I want everyone to be able to ask questions. I just want to hit social media one more time because I think, especially as your kids are becoming teenagers, it's so important. My daughter actually took herself off of social media this summer. She decided it wasn't that good for her. And so she kind of went off it for 3 months, and then she's slowly gone back on. But she's put time limits on. So she knows, like by 8 o'clock at night, it turns off. So she's not looking at it. What are the effects on the teens that you're seeing because of social media and these perfect images that they're seeing all the time?
I know that the perfect images can affect self-esteem and self-concept and how you feel about yourself. It's a false sense of what reality is. But then also it affects the development of kids and adolescents cognitively, because the longer, and it doesn't have to be just social media, it's screen media in general, because kids will stay up late texting and checking their feeds and checking their emails, and that delays the onset of sleep. And when we talk about the need for sleep, I mean, adolescents need 9 to 9.5 hours of sleep a night for optimal brain function, right? And so when we interfere with their ability to get more sleep because of screen media exposure, it affects their social emotional functioning and their cognitive functioning. And when they can't think, then they feel bad about the fact that they're struggling with their learning, and so it's just this cycle.
Yeah. Hamster wheel.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like just as we as adults try, like I would sleep with my phone. This is embarrassing that I'm going to be saying this and it's being taped. I would sleep with my phone, like not just on my bedside table, but like by my pillow. Because I was like, oh, the monitor's on. And like, I don't need that anymore. But I was still saying, I know, it's crazy, right? But that is what interrupts your sleep. So even for your kids, like they may not have the wherewithal. It was hard for me to let that go. So they're not going to be able to. Like, to really, like, have a guideline where, like, their phones especially are not within, like, an arm's length distance for them. Or not in the room. They don't need to be in the room. Like, when everyone wakes up in the middle of the night multiple times. We all do. It's part of our whole circadian rhythm. We wake, we fall back asleep. But if you wake up for that moment and you check your phone or you expose yourself to the blue light, we all know, and especially our kids, then it's uninterrupted. And I cannot stress enough, even though we've already said it, like sleep is the magic pill. Like it will destroy the development of your brain as a child, as an adolescent. It will decrease your ability to be happy. It will decrease your ability to cope. It is so important. And then with social media, I know it all is sort of on the nose, makes sense to us that like, yes, the validation, the stress from it, when they go to, I don't know how I would have been a child in this time going to school being like, how many likes did I get? How many likes did I not? Whose party just happened? The FOMO, all of it. It's tough. But if there's one thing I could really say from all the research that's done and the new research that just came out, is when your child is using social media, just ask them during it, how do you feel? Like, get a monitor, a read on how they feel. And sometimes social media, if it's used correctly, like it could, kind of what you were saying in the beginning about like if a meme makes you happy and brings you joy, sometimes these things are actually bringing us more connection and they do make us happy. But we have to check ourselves because oftentimes it's not. And so it's really about the quality of how they feel when they're using, more so than just the quantity of measuring how much time they're on it.
Can I really quickly just
yeah,
say
go
one-
ahead.
Okay, so really quickly, I just want to say that the two things that I see the most in the groups that I do with the teen boys and girls across the board, boys and girls ages like 11 to 15, one, they all feel they are getting judged nonstop all the time by every single person. Okay, and then the other thing that I'm seeing, and we touched about on this a little bit, is social connections. They don't know how to interact with people. I literally spend time sitting with 13, 14, 15-year-old girls and boys, helping them to put texts together when they want to make plans with other people, because they literally don't know how to talk to someone, whether it's in text or in person. And so I have parents who are hiring me to help their children learn to be social.
It's amazing, right? Okay, I want to open it up to some questions. So anyone have any questions for these amazing women? Go ahead in the pretty blouse.
My son is almost 3, and we're trying to build good communication skills with him now so that he's resilient. What can you do in this age group to help them be resilient?
Use emotion words. Talk a lot about emotions, a lot. And not just sad, angry, happy, like the plethora of words that we have to describe emotions. And talk about it, especially with young boys. It's like one of the best things you can do.
Model. Literally share like I have a 2.5-year-old boy. Exactly. Well, he's 2 and like 8 months, so almost 3. Just modeling and sharing and being open about your process. They know and take in so much more than what you could ever imagine they actually are taking in. Like they take it all in. And so I think just, again, exposing them to the full range of emotion, giving it a label, but also showing them how you have those emotions, highlight them, and what you do and go through them, and asking those leading questions, those great questions of what's something that made you happy today? Like they know. Or what's something that made you sad today? Or what's something that brought you excitement? Or what can you do to be, exactly, all those questions, like you can ask your 2-year-old that, or 1-year-old even. They can, I think the earlier the better.
I would say, too, is to help kids at a young age develop what we call a growth mindset. And because they're going to be learning all the time, and there'll be things that they find difficult to do, from tying their shoes to zipping up their zipper, and teaching them that while that something might be difficult now, that it will not always be this way. With enough effort and with enough practice and with enough guidance and strategies and support, they'll be able to accomplish goals. Because otherwise, I can't do this. I'm not good at math. I'm not a good student. I'm not a good friend. So you have to help them develop a growth mindset. I always teach my kids, I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, the power of yet. So I can't tie my shoes yet. Okay, I can't read yet, right? And so that gives them the sense that they will be able to accomplish something in the future if they have enough support and they have put enough effort in. So you praise the effort.
We use the word for now.
Yes.
So same thing. In my house, it was always for now. Right now, I can't do that. Well, for now. And it changed that mindset. And we also did roses and thorns too, which I know a lot of people do, but that was how I was able to talk with my kids when they were little. And they still bring it up now. If we're at the dinner table and there's a lull in the conversation, they'll be like, let's pull out the roses and thorn bit, and it works.
I started doing high-low new silly with my kids every day when they were 3. Still do it every day. And it's amazing. And it also is a conversation starter, by the way.
Yeah.
So with that. Like tell me to hi. Sorry. So this is similar to what they were talking about, but every day, since my kids were 3 years old, at the dinner table or in the carpet somewhere, at some point in the afternoon or evening, sometimes before bed, I want to hear high, low, new, silly. What was your high? What was your low? What was something that was new? And what was something that was silly? And then, and 90% of the time, it ends up being a really great conversation.
I think it's also watching your language because of the modeling. So trying as hard as you can. It's going to be tough because it's part of our everyday, but in front of our kids, not saying phrases like, I can't, I never will, this will always be. We do those things, and those are falling more on the pessimistic side, but I'm having such a bad day, this is never going to work out. We want to try without judgment to limit ourselves from saying those type of phrases in front of our kids because that's the opposite of optimism. And growth mindset, which is the same thing. Yeah. Exactly.
Probably have time for one more question? One more question. Do we have, go ahead.
How do you positively motivate a 6-year-old? Like, getting out the house, we have enough time. She wakes up in time. I just hear myself starting to nag, and I have to say it so many times, and I never thought I'd do that, Mom, and I can't figure out how to do it in a way where I'm setting boundaries for her, but doing it where she's just great responsive.
So positively motivate, not be a nag.
So I'm a big believer in natural consequences at starting really at any age, right? So as opposed to taking things away, things happen naturally when our children don't do what we're asking them to do. And I also don't think that we need to tell them something more than 3 times. So, and I think, again, at any age, I think that after you've told your child something 3 times in a positive and respectful way, then you can, if something happens, if they leave the house and they're cold because they didn't take the jacket, you don't rush to school with that jacket. If they left lunch at home, you don't rush to school with lunch, right? Those are natural consequences. And it's okay for our children. Nothing's going to happen if they miss a meal or if they're cold or if they're late or if they throw a tantrum at a birthday party and you have to leave the birthday party or in the market and they don't get their snack. Some of those things do infringe on us and what we want, but that's part of being a parent. And to Deepika's point, it's really hard to parent. And sometimes we have to make a tough decision to teach our children something.
And I think we have to set them up for success too. So if you know that getting out the door in the morning is really difficult, then you think about it in the evening before school, let's set them up for success. And what are the things that are really challenging for your daughter in the morning to get them done? And how can we do that now? And let her set that up so that she feels mastery, that she can manage that.
And also like creating some time and space for something for her to verbalize like what she's excited about for the day every day. We talk about this idea of a positive morning ritual. I feel like it's on like every blog right now. Like, what's your morning ritual for adults? And it's important for our kids to have those too. And sometimes if they have a positive morning ritual, it's much easier. They know what to look forward to. You're giving them a space to talk about something they're excited about for the day, and it's up to her. It could be anything. And you give highlight to that. And there is so much power in routine as humans, as we talked about, not just kids, but adults. Like we crave and we're optimally functioning when we're in a routine. We know what to expect. It's setting ourselves up for self-mastery. We feel safe, we feel grounded, and we can check something off of our list. It's much better to highlight things that you've done and checked off your list. Like I call it a ta-da list instead of a to-do list. You're doing so much, and so are your kids. So also highlighting that in the evening of like everything that they've done, that they've accomplished, that, you know, maybe it was tying their shoe or drinking water, or like it's something little or big, like they built something in school or they took a picture, whatever it is. Like, I think just giving light to that so it doesn't always feel like you have to do this or what do you have to do today? We have to go to school. It's like, what are you excited to do today? And flipping the language around again.
Okay, that's it. I want to thank our amazing panel. We have Brett, we have Karen, we have Marissa, and Deepika. Did I get it right? That's fine.
It was
So close and yet so far away. Anyway, I want to thank all of you for hanging in there. Probably this is the last panel of the day, so I appreciate you guys all staying around. Follow these women on social media if you can, and get some inspiration from them to raise your kids the best way that you can.